Dear friends, what an incredible honor and somewhat of a daunting task to open our annual meeting by thinking with you about where we are, where we're going, and what moral tools we need to guide us on this important journey. I'm sure that you, like me, find yourself a little adrift in the new normal we are all experiencing as a result of COVID-19. And I hope that what I share with you today will teach, encourage, and inspire you for the journey we will share over the upcoming months and years. In the fall, as I started planning for this talk, I was thinking in terms of metaphorical voyages and dream destinations, but it's not metaphorical anymore. We're on a crazy, previously untraveled, and frankly treacherous journey together. We know where we started before COVID, and we know where we're heading after COVID. But the unknowns we're facing are frightening and at times almost overwhelming. So what do we need for this journey? How can we best navigate through the terrible hardships and unthinkable decisions that we and our colleagues are making? You need to know where you are now, you need to know where you want to go, and then you need a map and a compass. When Jay called me last fall and asked me to speak about the moral compass, we lived in a different world. A world filled with restaurants, meetings, flights, elective surgeries, and gatherings with friends. But it was also a world filled with inequities and moral issues that affected our patients, our families, our friends, and our neighbors. And then the world stopped. It's hard to imagine there might be gifts arising from this horrendous pandemic, but as a result of the isolation needed to protect us, we've all experienced a pause that has given us the space and the time we need to notice things we maybe didn't see before. And what we have seen cannot be unseen. The writer and film director Julio Gambuto described the things we see now more clearly as a result of COVID-19 like this. A carless Los Angeles with clear blue skies. A healthcare system that cannot provide basic protective equipment for its frontline. Small businesses and very large ones that do not have enough cash to pay their rent or workers. A government that has so severely damaged the credibility of our media that 300 million people don't know who to listen to for the basic facts that can save their lives. As we think about our journey through this historic event into our new future, remember, what we have seen cannot be unseen. So I think it's important we ask ourselves, will we use this moment? Or maybe a better way to ask, how can we take the things that we now see differently and use that information to improve the care of children? I suspect that all of you have used a compass at some point in your life, but like me, you probably haven't given it much thought. I'm also sure you know that a classic compass uses a fixed point, the magnetic North Pole, as a point of reference, which allows us to determine direction. With that fixed point and knowing which direction you want to go, you can then determine your bearing. The definition of bearing pertinent to this discussion is direction, especially angular direction, measured from one position to another using geographic or celestial reference lines. But what an interesting and multi-level word, because bearing can also mean the way we carry or conduct ourselves, something that supports parts of other things in a structure, and something that supports things that are heavy. And as in bear fruit or offspring, it can also mean bringing forth new things. In reading about compasses, I also learned that a compass has to be held steady and level to work. When a compass is held level, the needle turns until after a few seconds, to allow oscillation to die out, it settles into its equilibrium orientation. What a great image. You have to be still for a compass to work. So let's take advantage of this unique time and the stillness it provides to think together about our journey as an organization. Our journey began with Robert Gross and William Ladd, who envisioned this new field. Our organization's journey began in 1955 with the first meeting of the American Pediatric Surgical Association. The giants whose shoulders we stand on took a fledgling field and guided it to where we are now, with evidence-based medicine, highly skilled care, and amazingly trained surgeons. There is little doubt that moving forward, pediatric surgery with our amazing leaders, educators, policymakers, administrators, and clinicians will continue to change the world, one child and one community at a time. If we want to guide that journey with a moral compass, we do need to understand where we are right now and where we want to go. There are many parts of our collective journey that we could ponder together, but I think there's three that are particularly important. The first topic I want us to think about is medical education. We recruit wonderful students into medicine, young people who are bright, dedicated, and altruistic. These amazing students become our fearless, hardworking, and dedicated general surgery residents, and go on to be selected to become our future colleagues. We know in pediatric surgery, we get to pick the best and the brightest, and we train those wonderful individuals to join us in this amazing field. Our specialty, and medicine as a whole, has no problem with who practices, how hard they work, or how dedicated they are to the art and science of medicine. We also have an army of talented and dedicated educators who during this pandemic have almost instantaneously created new ways to keep medical education moving forward. We don't lack for great people here either. But our system of training medical students, residents, and pediatric surgeons has issues that we need to be honest about as well. So if we were to use our moral compass to guide us past the issues that hold us back from a better future for medical education, what changes would we want to make? This pandemic has revealed again the astounding debt that our residents and young colleagues face. Training physicians and other healers is expensive. Almost every other industrialized nation has recognized that medical education is something that is necessary for public health and public well-being. And for that reason, medical school is either free or highly subsidized in those countries. Restructuring the financing of medical education is an important goal for our field and for society as a whole. If we want to keep recruiting the best students into medicine, we have to make this change. This change would also have another important benefit. Students would be more at ease choosing a primary care specialty if they knew they could avoid hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. This would help fill a need that once again, this pandemic has accentuated. As we are moving toward the goal of more equitable and affordable medical education, we also need to forgive debts already incurred, especially given the incredible sacrifices and courage our young colleagues have demonstrated during this pandemic. We can see clearly that we must find a different way to finance graduate medical education. The fact that resident salaries are linked to hospital finances has two significant negative consequences. First, residents can only work in hospitals which control their salary, even if those locations are not optimal for their training. The second consequence of our current system is the risk it creates for our field. Hospitals are realizing that they can get the same benefit in terms of work from mid-level providers that residents have always provided. It's not their fault. Hospitals in general have no mission to educate. For hospitals, even training hospitals, it's a purely financial equation. which means we are in imminent danger of losing over half of our GME-funded positions in the very near future if we don't come up with an alternate solution. The other casualty of our current educational system is poor faculty participation in medical student and resident education. In many, if not most institutions, surgery faculty pay a penalty if they teach, since it takes them away from the clinics. Educating future physicians, surgeons, and pediatric surgeons is our responsibility. Somehow we must develop a system that not only rewards, but incentivizes those who teach. And finally, at a root level, we must address the fact that academic medical centers are at a financial disadvantage in our current system, which directly and adversely affects medical education. The second topic I want us to consider is our responsibility to create a better future for patients through research. As pediatric surgeons, we live in a time where we know how to know. And more importantly, how to know when we don't know. Through the work of the Outcomes Committee, educational programs like this meeting, and publications in the Journal of Pediatric Surgery and other journals, the members of APSA work hard to teach each other new information, which has led and continues to lead to improved patient outcomes. This research has contributed to an era of explosive growth of information and technology, growth that is profoundly changing the way we care for patients. Research is critically important for our mission, but in our current system, there is less and less funding available, and more pressure on surgeons to generate RVUs, to generate income, which disincentivizes our colleagues to pursue their research dreams. This pandemic has also revealed another moral crisis: the sad truth that there are people who deliberately spread falsehoods or take advantage of people's fear, with complete disregard for well-established research findings and recommendations. So as we think about how to map our journey in terms of scientific research, let's start with the obvious. There can never be two opinions about a scientific fact. It is part of our responsibility as physicians to advocate for honesty and scientific integrity and to call out falsehoods that could injure children in our care or their families. There is no debate that as a society, we will only move forward if we support medical research, a lesson our country is learning in real time as a result of COVID-19. But like medical education, it's important we ponder how we have evolved into a system that makes it difficult for physician scientists to accomplish the research they're inspired to pursue. We need accomplished physician scientists to advance medical science. We need to support their research. But that's only possible if we find ways to support researchers at the beginning of their careers as well. Our new paradigm should strive to not only allow, but actually incentivize residents and junior faculty to do research. Pediatric surgeons have a heart for children. And as we often remind ourselves, we are in the business of saving lifetimes, not lives. But if we're to take our role seriously, we must dedicate ourselves to protecting the future of all children, not just the individual child in front of us, which is the third topic I'd like us to consider. In 2018, after a steady decrease, the number of uninsured children in the United States rose to 3.9 million, or 5% of all American children. We don't know how many of the millions of Americans who lost their jobs because of the pandemic have children, but it is fair to say that we are facing an increase, perhaps of epic proportions, in uninsured children as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we also know that the crisis of access to medical care is, has been, and will continue to be disproportionately injurious to children of color. We are proud as pediatric surgeons to save lifetimes instead of lives. Let's get out that moral compass again. What does that really mean? I don't think there's any way around it. There is no moral or ethical position that can support anything less than universal access to healthcare for children. But it goes beyond just access to healthcare. We're in the business of saving lifetimes, which means creating a system where children can thrive, grow, and meet their potential. So we also have a moral obligation to use our platform to promote and support equal educational opportunities and protect families from financial ruin, especially from bankruptcy due to hospital bills. We must also be advocates for the basic things children need to reach their full potential, such as healthy food, clean water, and clean air. But none of this can happen without learning new ways to see. Just like unpolluted Los Angeles that we are able to see for the first time in decades, let's use this time, this pause, to learn how to really see. Let me start with a concept that you may not have heard about yet. Each of us has a social location that is a composite of our social identities, your gender, your race, your sexual identity, etc. There is a perceived and totally constructed hierarchy of these social identities in every society. In the United States at this moment, it's pretty clear that the dominant social location is white, male, cisgendered, heterosexual, less than 60 years of age, able-bodied, and born in the United States. I'm leaving it there without adding other aspects of social locations such as education, immigrant status, etc. Here's the main thing to learn from this concept. It affects what you can see. If you're in a dominant social location, in other words, white, male, heterosexual, cisgendered, able-bodied, you most likely cannot see the location of others that are not equally dominant, even though you are sure there's no way you are less than supportive of people that aren't like you. David Foster Wallace describes this phenomena in his amazing commencement address, This is Water. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a little bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" The water of American society is white, male, heterosexual, cisgendered, young, and able-bodied. It's so pervasive, we can't even see it. Let me give you a concrete example. This is a true story. A well-respected surgical leader, who I consider a friend and a true ally to women in surgery, stopped me one day. He was super excited about something he'd just learned and couldn't wait to tell me. He said, "Did you know that male physicians are introduced with their titles more than women?" I wasn't sure. I actually didn't believe it, but I started paying attention and it's true. Now, what I thought in response to his question was, only since day one of medical school, but what I said was very supportive because I understood that he had started to see something that he hadn't been able to see before because of his social location. Studies have shown that when a man introduces a woman speaker, he will refer to her with her title only 49.2% of the time, but when he introduces a man, it's 72.4% of the time. My friend was an ally. He's a great guy who had no idea what he couldn't see until he could. So yes, one of the most important aspects of a moral compass is our ability to think in new ways about the water that is around us. But it's not enough to just understand this concept, to understand that we all have privilege, some more than others. If we're going to move towards a better future, we have to learn to use that privilege for change. I'm not naive, and I certainly don't believe there's a quick fix. But I do know this. When we find ourselves in the middle of a complex operation where something hasn't gone as planned, we don't throw up our hands. We move a little to the right, check the compass, correct our course. We keep going deliberately, one step at a time, slowly, until we arrive at our destination. A patient waking up in the PACU, their family around them, in better health when we finished than when we started. So what if we looked at the complex issues we face as those responsible for educating, creating, and protecting the future, and use this same skill set? For many years, I've had a sign over my desk with this quote from Jack Kornfield. At the end of everyone's life, there are only two questions they ask. Did I live wisely? And did I love well? That's a pretty good North Pole for a moral life. But however you choose to articulate your individual purpose, how you decide what your true north is, the next important task, now and repeatedly, is to ask yourself, am I on course? You may have noticed this photo on my first slide and wondered what it was. I took this photo in February, just about the time the first case of COVID-19 was diagnosed in the United States. This is the edge of the frozen Hudson Bay in Churchill, Manitoba. And the magnificent stone marker is an Inukshuk. The first peoples of Arctic territories use Inukshuks for navigation, as a point of reference, a marker for travel routes, to designate good fishing or hunting, and to mark places of veneration. I hope that one of the things I've done today is give you the equivalent of Inukshuks for our profession and this wonderful organization. In other words, as you are navigating towards a moral and better future in education, look for these markers. Reducing and forgiving medical student debt, giving surgical program directors financial control of resident education, promoting and incentivizing faculty for time spent educating, and finally, looking for any and all ways to level the playing field for academic medical centers. The markers to look for as we travel toward a future of new discoveries are anything that supports and promotes honesty and integrity in research and medicine. Anything that speaks to how important research is for our society and our field. Anything that supports scientific pursuits for established faculty, residents, medical students. And finally, as those who serve to protect children, we should consider these markers guiding us closer to a moral society, a society that can allow all children to reach their full potential, universal health care for children, and a society that provides the necessary safety net for times such as we find ourselves in now, to make sure that education and the things that children need to grow, feel safe, and thrive are protected. When we think about trying to change the future, it's overwhelming. But like the old adage of how to eat an elephant, the answer is one bite at a time. The most important thing is to just get started. Take the first step. I'm not talking about the big journey here. I'm talking about your daily interactions with patients and colleagues, the work we do in committees, the time we all spend at computers documenting and now doing telehealth, and the act of just being present and bearing witness during this time of deep, deep sorrow as we live through the suffering around us from COVID-19. In all those moments, ask yourself, are my actions bringing us closer to where we'd like to end up? If not, how can I correct my course just a little to get us closer than we would have been otherwise? That's all it takes, actually. One by one, we begin to define how we are individually going to try to become better people, which leads to how APSA becomes a better organization, which results in concrete changes to improve the lives of the children we take care of. It truly has been one of the greatest honors of my career to give the Robert E. Gross Lecture this year. Thank you for the privilege of sharing these thoughts with you. I'm so proud of my profession and all of you who are or will be part of it. This part of our journey, this moment in time, is difficult, but we're on this journey together. I'm sure that we will take this time, use this pause to see more clearly and move forward decisively as an organization to make the world better for all children. Thank you so much.